Sex may be one of the most effective marketing tools used to promote products and services, but when does using it cross the moral line?
Who would you rather listen to news from, a hot girl or an old man in a suit?
Well, I mean, that's not a fair question to ask. Whoever's most informed, whoever has the best credentials, the hot girl.
Our culture has become very comfortable with open sexuality. Why is that? Well, it's because a naturalistic worldview now dominates the culture.
Once you have broken that connection between procreation and sex, it leads you down a path to a place where I think sexual activity becomes another form of entertainment.
Everywhere we look today, we are surrounded by a sea of sensual and sexual images in everything that we do. And as we think of the exposure to sexuality in every part of our lives, have we ever stopped to ask what sex is really all about? One of the most important things that any of us can do is to ask some deeper questions about the things that we see every day, like our sexuality. And if we go in and look at sexuality in the Bible, we realize that God has a great story about sex and about sexuality that is often missed by most people, even in the church today. And to learn about sex is to learn about the love of God. And to do that, you go back in the Bible and start the story of where sex first enters the story of human creation. And in Genesis chapter 2, we hear the story of sex and marriage and the beginning of this whole drama which teaches us something wonderful about the love of God. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. So if we're going to understand what sex and sexuality is all about, we of course have to go back to the beginning of the story in the book of Genesis. And the passage that we just read and heard about is the story of how everything began. It began between Adam and Eve, a man and a woman, in the institution of marriage. And the Bible gives us a story that the man and the woman came together and the two became one. And that really is the story of sexuality, is that two things becoming one, a male and a female united together in a bond of marriage. Also, a fascinating part of the story is that when man and woman were together in sexuality, there was no shame. They were naked, they were together, but there was no shame. And so that's really the great story of what God intended, was that we would come together in marriage, a man and a woman, and that there would be no shame because it was a gift of God. Now, as we look at this whole beginning story of our creation in Genesis chapter 2, we have the story of what sex is really all about. Because sex is not really about sex. Sex is about the covenant. It's about the idea of two people joining together into a bond, into a relationship of love. And far beyond a man and a woman coming together in a covenant of marriage, we see an early picture of the great story that God has for us, that He is really the one that wants to connect Himself to us. The Lord is the one that wants to unite us to Himself in something the Bible calls a covenant. And all through the Old Testament, as well as the New Testament, God's story is to get together with us, to join together with us, in which the two will become one. And as God and man come together in unity, come together in oneness, as Christ unites Himself with the church in covenant, we have the relationship that God is looking for, that sexuality points to. And when we ultimately find that sex is not again about sex, but about love, the love of God for His people, everything changes. And one of the most important things that we can do in this hour as believers is to begin to bring that dignity and that spirituality to the meaning of sex. And as opposed to having sex being used to sell us a new car or maybe buy something in the marketplace, we need to see that sex is a holy gift from the Lord designed to teach us about His great love. May we go out and use the story of God's love for us, pictured through sexuality, and share it with as many people as we can.